A fragile ceasefire, repeated violations, and deadly airstrikes. Southern Lebanon is under pressure like never before. Despite an agreement reached last year, Israeli strikes continue almost daily, targeting Hezbollah commanders and infrastructure. Beirut insists that it is committed to state control of weapons, while Hezbollah refuses to disarm. Caught between Israeli escalation, looming deadlines, and internal political deadlock, Lebanon faces a defining crossroads. In today's episode, we ask the big question: what is the fate of Hezbollah's disarmament? And can the state impose a monopoly on arms, or will military pressure ultimately decide Hezbollah's arsenal? I'm Hala Al-Hamalawi. Welcome to Think Tank.
Our world is becoming unhinged.
Three people were killed on Sunday in separate Israeli drone strikes in southern Lebanon, raising tensions over the fragile ceasefire. According to L'Orient today, Israel said that it targeted Hezbollah members accused of rebuilding the group's infrastructure and claimed to have killed around 40 fighters across southern Lebanon since October. A third strike hit a car in Juwaya, killing the driver, a municipal council member. Israel described him as a key Hezbollah operative. And Israeli airstrikes have intensified in southern Lebanon, while Lebanese authorities accuse Israel of continuing violations and maintaining military positions. Since the ceasefire began last year, more than 380 fighters have reportedly been killed, with Israel accusing Hezbollah of over 1,900 violations. The news outlet reported that Israel has breached the truce more than 12,000 times, killing 343 people, including 136 civilians. "13 months after a ceasefire was meant to end hostilities between Israel and Hezbollah, Lebanon is facing renewed fears of an Israeli military escalation that could threaten its fragile recovery. The Washington Post reports that mediators, including the U.S., have warned of a possible large-scale operation, though timing remains unclear. Meanwhile, Lebanon is intensifying diplomatic efforts to safeguard the state. Israel has carried out near-daily airstrikes since the ceasefire took effect, destroying infrastructure and maintaining a presence in 5 southern areas, actions that Lebanese and UN officials say violate the truce. The Lebanese army said, however, that it is nearing completion of Phase 1 of a weapons control plan in the south. The newspaper added that tensions eased slightly last week when Lebanon and Israel agreed to appoint civilian representatives to a ceasefire monitoring body, a rare direct negotiation, though airstrikes continue.
Southern Lebanon is once again at the center of a dangerous countdown as Israeli airstrikes intensify despite a formal ceasefire. A long-simmering question of Hezbollah's weapons is being forced to the forefront. Although a ceasefire reached in November 2024 was meant to hold more than a year of hostilities, Israel has continued near daily strikes, exposing the fragility of the truce. On Sunday alone, Israeli strikes killed 3 people in the southern towns of Yatir, Safad al-Batih, and Juwaya. According to Lebanon's health ministry, the Israeli military said it had struck and eliminated Zakaria Yahya al-Hajj, described as a senior Hezbollah figure in Juwaya. Israel argues that these operations target Hezbollah fighters and infrastructure to prevent the group from rearming. It also continues to occupy 5 strategic hilltops in southern Lebanon. The move, Beirut considers a clear ceasefire violation. Diplomatic engagement between Israel and Lebanon remains limited. The only channel is a ceasefire monitoring mechanism involving the United States, France, and the United Nations, with the next round of talks set for December 19th. Meanwhile, deadlines outlined in the ceasefire are approaching. Under the agreement, Hezbollah was required to withdraw its forces north of the Litani River and dismantle its military infrastructure in the south. A government-approved plan assigns the Lebanese army the task of completing this dismantling south of the Litani by year's end, before addressing Hezbollah's weapons nationwide. Caught between external military pressure and internal political deadlock, Beirut stands at a defining crossroads, with southern Lebanon emerging as a pressure zone shaped by the collision of military action, diplomacy, and domestic politics.
Delving more into the situation in Lebanon, we're joined from Beirut by Mr. Marcel Baloughi, a military expert, and from Washington by Mr. Fadi Hillani, a senior fellow at the National Council on U.S. Arab Relations. Welcome, gentlemen, to Qnews. I'll start with you, Mr. Hillani. Now, in your own point of view, is Lebanon running out of time on the Hezbollah disarmament dilemma?
Good morning, and thank you very much for having me, and greetings also to your guest in Beirut. Obviously, from a U.S. perspective, yes, the Lebanese government is obviously running out of time. Of course, we have a very much kind of a complicated political and strategic scene, if you will. There has been an understanding by the U.S. that the Lebanese government has been doing much in order to spread its sovereignty, of course, in South Lebanon. Very much there are multiple points where the LAF, the Lebanese army, has been able to spread. We know that Hezbollah also has been pulled to the north of the Litani River. However, the Israeli demands that Hezbollah disarm is giving, as we know, a very narrow deadline for the Lebanese government. At the same time, the U.S. understands that for the Israeli side, Hezbollah represents a national strategic threat. We have an understanding that, of course, looking at Lebanon, there is much complications when we come to think about the sectarian balance, the governance capacity. However, from a U.S. perspective also, there could be no stability, neither in Lebanon or the region, if there is armed militia working without government consent. So the U.S. is obviously working with the Lebanese government, but at the same time, unfortunately, I will say, the U.S. patience is running thin. And there is an understanding that the U.S. doesn't want the Israeli side to go to an all-out war with Lebanon. But these violations are still going on, and there is much excuse the Israeli government is giving. And obviously, with the deadline approaching, yes, we are running out of time.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Baloughi, to what extent is the current Israeli military escalation a deliberate strategy to force the disarmament issue rather than a purely military response?
Good afternoon to you and to the honorable guest and the viewers. Of course, the Israeli as well as the U.S. in this U.S. war want to break their military wings, and it's an international war as well as an Arab war, and therefore the time limit set by the United States and the Hezbollah was not as lenient and not as flexible as the United States have expected, and that's why the agreement was not implemented from both sides, the Lebanese side and the Israeli side, and consequently the terrorist aspect here is zero. The Hezbollah cannot respond, and that's why we see the Iranian responses affecting the issue significantly. Lebanon is now an open war area. Our South Litani agreement was not um, implemented, and it's all parties are stalling, and Hezbollah day by day is saying that they are ready, they are assembling powers, and this does not facilitate the situation. This escalates the situation further and highlights the helpless Lebanese government situation. We see the economic negotiations that is not presenting anything to Lebanon. It's not protecting Lebanon. On the contrary, Israel might take advantage of this after the deployment of the army to carry out operations against Hezbollah. So it's a crossroads. There are no options, no alternatives. Hezbollah is still very powerful south Litani and north Litani, and they request the Israeli and the United States to uh, to stop intervening. We see the Syrian negotiations advancing, and the Lebanese issue the United States wants an alliance and a truce in the region if it's not settled by with the Lebanese cause. There are no truces, so we're heading to an escalation. The agreement has not been implemented. Under U.S. supervision and French and Egyptian supervisions, all were to no avail because the Lebanese state was only buying time, and Hezbollah was taking advantage of its extension inside the Lebanese state to push the entitlement requested from them and place the entire Lebanese people hostages in this hanging situation, a failed state waiting for external responses.
Mr. Hellani, given the repeated Israeli violations and occupation of 5 strategic points in southern Lebanon since the ceasefire, is the UN Security Council Resolution 1701 still a viable framework for managing the broader the issue of Hezbollah arms?
It's still actually a framework, as you mentioned in your question, but unfortunately, this framework is very much kind of symbolic, if you will, paper, rather than a very much an implemented framework, in the sense that, yes, we have a resolution that is trying to do what is referred to as conflict management in terms of trying to de-escalate. But the main purpose of this resolution, as we know, is to end the war, bring a truce. So end of the fighting between the Israeli side and, of course, the Lebanese side, which is obviously in this case Hezbollah. However, with this, with the continued violations from Israel and the continued occupation of, as we know, 5 strategic points in South Lebanon, this is bringing that resolution, as I mentioned, to a more symbolic terms rather than a very much significant implication. The problem is that we don't have a kind of enforcement mechanism in that resolution. In other words, we know that since the implementation of the truce, there has been more than 10,000 airstrikes in Lebanon. In your report, you mentioned 12,000 violations in terms of airstrikes, and also the death toll in Lebanon has exceeded 300, as we know. Without a kind of enforcement mechanism like pressure on Israel and sanctions in terms of the violators, it's very hard to think of this resolution as bringing the war to end as much as a kind of a conflict management mechanism. I will see the very much the end or the true implementation of this resolution and end of the fighting, and that is still so far not happening because the Israeli side is still giving, as I mentioned in the previous comment, some excuses about the mechanism of disarming Hezbollah.
Yes.
What is needed with this resolution is pressure on all sides, especially the Israeli side that continues to use its military force to airstrike within Lebanon. Most of the casualties are civilians, actually, destroying the civilian infrastructure of Lebanon. So that resolution is, as I mentioned, symbolic, especially without a kind of enforcement mechanism, especially on the Israeli side.
Mr. Baluchi, now the Lebanese army has been tasked with disarming Hezbollah by the end of the year and says that phase one is nearly complete. So given that we are in mid-December already, Hezbollah still refuses to disarm. Is this deadline realistic?
The Lebanese army has a lot of technical expertise and they are carrying out their duties in a very significant way. But these gaps influencing the political um, goals of Israel, and these 20 to 30% cannot be controlled by the army, and it's an issue of the political decision. As long as the legislative power in Lebanon has the power over the executive power affecting the army work, we will not be able to reach any results securing peace in the region 100%. And we can say that 1701 is implemented on any other international resolution. And that's why the Lebanese situation and the interlinkage is affecting the implementation path. In addition, there is no consensus inside Lebanon. There are a lot of divisions even inside the Lebanese people. They wanted to confide the arms position to one entity, and Hezbollah also wants to keep their arms, which is affecting the path of the peace process. But the state must carry out by force the disarmament process, and the parties, the supporting parties or the opposing parties must be ignored in this matter, and the state must take power and control of the situation to stop the Israeli aggression. As if the Israeli escalates, it will be very lethal to the entire Lebanese territories, and they will displace the Lebanese population. And that's why the Lebanese army is not yet able to decisively implement the international resolution, which is highly significant. For the technical part, the technical committee or the Lebanese representation is not enough to prevent the so many restrictions that are hindering the reaching a deal. It's all buying time to run forward. And with the Saudi initiative last year, which included 50 states, would have helped a lot if all the parties were flexible enough. Now we are out of time, and there is no possibility to achieve this before the end of the year. And as part of the technical expertise that we have, it's more of a political decision than military decision.
Mr. Helani, now given the increasing pressure, how can the ceasefire in Lebanon survive near daily airstrikes?
In my opinion, the survival of the truce depends on two things: the diplomatic pressure and the transparent
diplomatic pressure by whom? By the United States or by the international community at large?
So, of course, international community by large, United States specifically. So what is needed is a combination of the diplomatic pressure and the timeline. So the diplomatic pressure on the Israeli side to have the Israeli government and the Israeli army stop bombarding Lebanon. As we know, violation of the ceasefire will give a reason for Hezbollah to say that Israel is waging war on us and we are resistance, and we have to, of course, try to help the Lebanese government resist the Israeli occupation. Also, Israel not withdrawing from the 5 strategic points in South Lebanon is giving also Hezbollah a claim that there is occupation and resistance is still a needed part of the Lebanese government. On the other hand, the Lebanese government needs also to provide a clear timeline of disarming Hezbollah. As we know, the first phase of the agreement, which is having Hezbollah go to the north of Litani, has been implemented, and we have the LAF obviously in South Lebanon, and that is good. But without a very clear timeline on how phase two is going to proceed, basically disarming Hezbollah, that is leaving an ambiguity actually and a political vacuum for the Israeli government to fill in with the airstrikes and the military, of course, operations it's doing in Lebanon almost on a daily basis. So what is needed from the Lebanese side is a clear timeline for phase two disarming Hezbollah, despite the understood internal complications of doing this. And from the international community and the US specifically, what is needed is some kind of diplomatic pressure, not only on the Lebanese government to be transparent, but also on the Israeli side to stop military occupation and operations, because these are, if doing something, they are undermining the strength of the Lebanese government and its credibility in front of its people and also in front of Hezbollah. And that is not going to help the process going ahead.
Exactly. Mr. Baloukji, now with the end of year deadline approaching, what are the biggest challenges that Lebanon is facing now in implementing the plan fully?
There are so many challenges. First of all, Hezbollah refuses to disarm, and they announced it publicly, and they announced they are building capacities now. We have the Syrian scene is changing rapidly, and we are surrounded by Syria and Israel. As the honorable guest said, Israel is taking advantage of the normalization process in line with the U.S. project, but the U.S. project is drawing the action plan set by the United States. And however, we pressure Israel. They have all the green lights to carry out whatever they want to get Iran out of the scene. And that's why Israel is not being pressured at all. It's all for show. This upcoming meeting, we are waiting for Netanyahu and President Trump. They are drawing a new action map which will give Israel all the green lights they need. We are now seeing Israel acting unilaterally in Lebanon to carry out their goals, and that's why pressure on Israel will not be very useful. We need, as Lebanon, to not give Israel to take advantage of the situation. Each Lebanon now displaced without humanitarian aid, without infrastructure. There is no clear future vision. It's all vague. There are no solutions in Lebanon, and the more the situation remains like this, it's going to be up for Israel to do whatever they want. It's true we do not have a civil war, but this escalation and pushing the entitlements and pushing the date exacerbates the internal divisions. It's now we have very significant divisions inside Lebanon. We need bold actions at the financial level, and Iran must be banned from intervening directly in Lebanon. Iran must be isolated completely from Lebanon so that Hezbollah would have a free decision to help and assist the Lebanese state. And we have seen that in the negotiations of President Berry. For the stability and to minimize the aggressions launched by Israel, and we are waiting for solutions that appear to nowhere near.
Mr. Helani, with the next talks on December 19th, what must be achieved in this meeting to prevent the situation from further deteriorating before the end of the year deadline?
That's a very good question. December 19 actually is a very important and significant point for de-escalation if these talks were carried successfully. So what is needed, number one, is both parties affirming and confirming their commitment to the ceasefire, number one. Number two, a clear timeline, as I mentioned in the previous comment, from the Lebanese government on how phase two is going to be implemented and when exactly Hezbollah is going to be disarmed. But at the same time, and that is number three, very importantly, the Israeli government halting and stopping all its military violations of Lebanese sovereignty. We cannot think about disarming Hezbollah while occupation continues. As I mentioned, this very much undermines the Lebanese government and
Yes.
its credibility, of course. Very much important also in these talks is to agree on a unified mechanism, oversight mechanism to report any violations, whether from Hezbollah or from the Israeli government. These violations, in my opinion, should be dealt with seriously by the international community, especially the United States. If these violations are not met with, let's say, sanctions or like kind of consequences, in my opinion, the Israeli government will possibly still continue these military operations. There are a combination of factors needed in December 19 from the Lebanese government, from the Israeli side, and most importantly, from the UNIFIL and the international community. Without all these factors combined, there will be very little hope for de-escalation in the coming days.
Mr. Balukji, now Israel argues that its strikes are to prevent Hezbollah from rearming. And this military pressure, is it likely to accelerate Hezbollah's compliance with the ceasefire terms, or does it risk an all-out war?
Hezbollah will not be able to respond to Israel, and the Israeli pressure does not affect Hezbollah. Hezbollah has built two layers in the south and underground to build its capacities, and they will not be able because the timing will not go in their favor. They will try to self-restrain and to respond. They have the protected area underground. However, Israeli bombings are happening. They will not be affected by the Lebanese people will be affected. If we confide this war, we do not have the deterrence factor, and Israel is working unilaterally carrying out the U.S. project. And as long as we do not have Hezbollah, or if we rule out Israel, we will not be able to stop Hezbollah. What we need here is our actionable steps from Lebanon to carry out the international resolution, to have a powerful state, a powerful government, and then we can apply pressure on Israel to get out. The military option is proven not to be the right option, not by Hezbollah's arms or by building capacities, or we cannot even disarm Hezbollah at the moment because Israel is occupying. We are required to protect the Lebanese people, to carry out the international resolution, and Hezbollah is required to follow this direction. Then that's what we need to do to dismiss Israeli presence out of Lebanon. We are going to see more aggressions from Israel, and we need to take bold and decisive actions. We need legislative authority to let the executive authority work its ways, to have a real state with all pillars established to liberate the Lebanese home. Otherwise, we will not be able to reach anywhere.
Mr. Helani, if Israel continues near daily strikes despite a US-backed ceasefire, what does this say about Washington's ability to enforce the agreement that it helped broker?
That is a very important question. We think about Washington as the side that has leverage to, of course, pressure the Israeli side. And this is why when you asked me a minute ago about like if the
who is responsible for putting pressure?
or Washington, Washington is the side that can and is able to put pressure on the Israeli side. However, the perspective in Washington is this. Hezbollah is a militia. It's a non-government actor, and it's a representation of Iran's influence in the region. So it has to be disarmed. Israel and the US are on the same page on this perspective. So, with these Israeli violations, which are, of course, very unhelpful to the ceasefire, at the same time, Washington sees this as a measure by the Israeli government to defend its national and strategic safety, if you will, especially the north border. With all the interest in Washington to implement the ceasefire and to reach a phase where there is no fighting, the perspective in Washington that with Hezbollah still not fully disarmed, there is still an understanding and acknowledgement for the reasons why Israel is violating that ceasefire. As I mentioned, because of kind of understanding that Hezbollah presents a threat to the national security of the Israeli side. So what is needed is, as I mentioned a minute ago, a combination of implementation of the ceasefire by fully disarming Hezbollah, and at the same time pressure from Washington on Israel to stop its violation. Yes. Unfortunately, without a clear understanding on how the timeline is going with disarming Hezbollah, Washington will continue acknowledging Israeli excuses for violating Lebanon's sovereignty and, of course, attacking what it says are targets owned by Hezbollah.
Well, that was Mr. Fadi Hilani, Senior Fellow at the National Council on U.S.-Arab Relations. Thank you so much, sir. And also Mr. Marcel Baloughi, military expert. Thank you as well. Thank you both gentlemen for joining us here and providing us with your thorough analysis. And this brings us to the end of today's episode of Think Tank, which always unveils the complexities of our changing world. Today we had a special focus on the situation in Lebanon and the disarmament of Hezbollah in light of the continued Israeli airstrikes on Lebanon. I'm Hala Al-Hamalawi. Thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned for more updates and analysis here on Qnews.